Welcome to this episode of How to Really Run a City, powered by Accelerator for America, the nation's leading do tank for cities. I'm Larry Platt of the Philadelphia Citizen, a nonprofit, nonpartisan media organization that seeks to reinvigorate democracy in the American city where it was born. Check us out at thephiladelphiacitizen.org. How to Really Run a City features two accomplished practitioners of the art of urban changemaking, former two-term Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed and former two-term Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter. If you've listened to past episodes, you know the drill. If you're frustrated by the bickering and finger-pointing and dysfunction coming from Washington, D.C., well, this podcast is a testament to the notion that there are really three political parties in America: Democrats, Republicans, and mayors, who have no choice but to be practical problem solvers. In today's episode, we'll hear a segment from our Accelerator for America partner, CEO Mary Ellen Wiederwall. She'll talk about the tenets of their housing crisis task force. And then, in the aftermath of the terrorist truck driver in New Orleans, followed by the wildfires in LA, we'll talk about emergency preparedness. Our guest will be Tom Henkey, who served for 6 years as Chicago's Senior Emergency Management Coordinator and is currently the Director of Emergency Management for Titan Security Group. But first, let's check in with our mayors. Hey, Mayor, how are you?
I'm good.
I owe you an apology.
What?
I completely spaced on the attending the unveiling of your portrait
Oh,
at City Hall.
yeah.
And I've been meaning to say to you that I really regret that.
Okay.
That
All
was a
right.
big
We're,
deal. I should
we're
have been there for
we're
you.
still good. I still like you.
Well,
Okay.
you lucky for me, you have low standards.
Well, that's been part of the key to my success.
uh,
You had to worry
boy,
about failing.
we're we're back in Trump's America, man.
Oh,
It's
we
like
very much are.
it's like every day there's some new. It's just
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. It's only been what, 4 days? I'm exhausted already.
Yeah. Well, that's why you got you got to be disciplined and stay away from it to
I
protect
know a
yourself.
lot of people are doing that, but that also scares me because that's what autocrats bank on, right? That people will tune out.
Well, I guess I'd say this. Maybe just don't try not to react to the announcement. See what actually is being proposed, right?
Yeah,
There's a rumor and then there's the news, right? You buy on the rumor, you sell on the news, because otherwise you'll just get whipsawed every day, trying to figure out what in the hell's going on. And all of it is designed to keep people in a frenzy, which goes to your point, because again, as the circus master, right? You got three ring circus going on. You never saw the elephants come out because you were busy watching this other thing over there, right? And then suddenly they're there. So yeah, I think we're all going to be in an adjustment period here, and he's going to govern by true social press releases, etc. But that actually doesn't get stuff done.
that's a
Um,
great point.
if,
Right.
if
Like
that's his goal.
infrastructure week in his first term.
Yeah,
Like, and he never
yeah.
did anything on infrastructure. So you
Nope, nope,
react to
never
what he
happened.
does.
Yeah. So, again, having seen this movie once, we just need to be mindful of how much it is to take seriously. Otherwise, you'll get overwhelmed by it. You could tune out to protect yourself, and then when the really big thing does happen or is proposed, you have no idea what's going on. So I think it's I
Yeah.
guess in boxing terms, they're called stick and move, right?
Right.
I mean, you check it out. Okay, let me go back to what I was doing. Yeah, I heard about that. Back to what I was doing. But you just that steady diet, man, it'll kill you.
That's good advice for any citizen. Not even people like us who are
Hmm.
in this. I've had so many people who are just like good, hardworking, tax-paying citizens
Hmm.
telling me, that's it. I'm out. I'm not watching the news. I'm not reading the newspaper. I'm not, and
Yeah,
and I get that self-protection, but I also worry
right,
because we need an engaged citizenry.
right, right, right. And you can't give up. You can't give up. Um, for a totally different reason. I was in a meeting yesterday, and an issue came up, and it was a question of what do we do, and tough decision. And I didn't quote it, but it was in my mind, and I said something else that conveyed the same message because I didn't want to insult anybody. But you know, the only thing the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
That was King, right?
No, it's attributed to Edmund Burke.
Okay.
But then when you look into it, no one's ever validated that it was Edmund Burke. So, you know, I mean, you know how those things go. All right. So, um, but you do have to keep fighting for what's right. And we all know the difference between right and wrong. The question is, how much energy do you have to put into the day-to-day stuff, right?
Yeah.
You talk about flooding the zone. I mean, he did about 50 some executive orders, right? I mean, it'll take weeks and months to decipher all that stuff. I mean, you can get an early read, but the true implications of it all it'll take a while.
Yeah.
And now they want workers to tell on their coworkers if they see a DEI like program that they might be running undercover, and if they don't tell, they're gonna get in trouble. And I mean, come on now, come on.
And I just saw a headline before we
Some
came on
weird.
here
This is
that
like 1984.
yeah, he said something about if states don't do what he wants, telling them
Yeah.
disbanding FEMA and telling them to handle disasters on their own.
Okay, let's see how that goes. Let's see how that goes. People like to complain about FEMA, but let's see what it's like when it's not around.
Yeah, exactly.
You he took away Fauci's protection, dignitary protection.
See that it
It's just mean.
just mean spirited. Yeah,
Just mean. This is all. This is the retribution tour.
that's right.
I'm trying to find it. Somebody, I think it was on Twitter. Person said, talking about their relatives who were for Trump. He said, my MAGA relatives, when they can't pay their mortgage, I'm not going to help them. When they can't pay for groceries, I'm not going to help them. When they can't do this, can't do that, can't do the other thing, and I have means, but this is what they wanted. So,
It's what you voted for. Yeah. Wait do you see tariffs, the effect of tariffs?
hmm
Now I do think that some of that is him negotiating, uh,
hmm
which is probably smart, but the way he does it and it strikes fear in people, and I
yeah,
just
yeah. Well, it's always about a fight. I mean, there's never any diplomacy,
yeah.
right? He just, because somebody asked, I saw this somewhere, and somebody asked, was Trump a bully when he was younger? And I think it's a flip. I think it's a flip. I think he was bullied.
Boy, that would be great to research.
I think he was bullied. Um, and so that's what he's dealing with.
Look at this good-looking guy that just joined
Wow,
us.
How are
look
you?
at him. Excuse me. Ah, ah. I'm getting static from my wife over here. Talk, talk,
What's she
talk about us,
saying?
talk about us trying to psychoanalyze Donald Trump.
Mayor Nutter was saying that he thinks Donald Trump was bullied as a kid, that he wasn't the bully.
Yeah.
It's an interesting
Yeah, yeah,
fantasy
I- yeah.
to have in your head.
I mean, that would explain some things. I don't know. Hey man, let me ask you a question, bro. How do you
Yes, brother.
how do you get your collars to stand up so straight?
Get them from Italy. Have them made in Italy. Some good people over there that know what they're doing. You know,
Hey Larry, we gotta get to this level.
You get the shirt made in Italy?
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a guy named Nito Bellucci.
He got a guy.
Shout
He's got
out to
a guy.
Nito.
got a guy.
I got a guy.
You got a
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, yeah.
Got a guy.
I need to look neat to come on for this harassment that I have to take for you guys. Even though I'm just Joe Sixpack, I'm every man down with the people.
Kasim Reed, you've never
I mean,
been Joe. You've never been Joe Six.
I wasn't able to go to Penn. I was just a working guy. You know,
What- Wasn't it like two podcasts ago? He was talking about the silver ghost or ghost silver or something, whatever.
no, it's a black ghost. It's not silver. It's black.
I'm sorry. I apologize. My bad. He's talking about some Joe Sixpack.
To our community, do you see what I go through in order to share my experiences with you?
My car could probably fit in your car's trunk.
Oh man, I love your car. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
one of
you're
the best days I ever had really was that day you showed me around. There's nothing like being shown around the city by a mayor of a city. It's just the best.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, I love that mini.
We had a good time. We had a good time. Did I ever tell y'all? Did I ever tell y'all the story about riding around with Lisa and I were riding around shortly after I left office,
Yeah,
and so we're coming into Center City from home,
yeah,
and I saw something, and I said, "Oh, I remember when we did XYZ over at that place, and
yeah,
opened that up." She's yeah,
yeah.
and then I saw something else, and oh, we did XYZ over there, yeah. And then I saw one more place. At that point, she said, "All right, wait a minute. We are not going to go down memory lane every time I get
Yeah,
in the car. I
yeah,
remember all these things. I was there. I know about it. Turn on the radio, drive the car, and that's the end of the conversation."
yeah. You can tell her she should just say, "I saw the movie. I've seen the whole movie. I know how it ends. I've seen it many times."
so guys, in the aftermath of all the emergencies that we've seen, and I'm not talking about the first 4 days of Donald Trump. I'm talking about uh, in New Orleans, the terrorist truck driver, and of course the horrific wildfires in LA. I thought it would be a good time to talk to someone like Tom Henkey, who served for 6 years as Chicago's senior emergency management coordinator, where he was responsible for disaster planning and response, as well as special events, physical security, infrastructure, transportation, and homeland security and anti-terrorism analysis. He's currently the director of emergency management for Titan Security Group and adjunct faculty at DePaul University's School of Public Service. Quite a resume. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Henke. I appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hello, guys, and good afternoon there on the East Coast.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Henke, so let's begin with first of all, is it okay to call you Tom?
Yes, please.
We all keep it very, as you'll see, very casual in this podcast.
I like it.
Sometimes
I like it.
sometimes even silly. Uh, but let me ask you this: just I know we get a lot of practitioners who know the answer to this that listening, but just for the lay person, what does a senior emergency management coordinator do actually? What is the job?
Sure. So it really is planning and response. So in the emergency management realm, you're trying to look at all hazards. My jurisdiction was the city of Chicago. So much like your esteemed host here, I had responsibility for a square set of turf with defined boundaries. But anything that occurred in that geographical area, anything that could impact the residents and visitors to that geographical area was my purview. So definitely natural hazards, human-caused hazards, and then hybrid hazards. So essentially anything that could cause casualties or property damage was part of that planning and response oversight.
And are you just like waking up every day and just thinking about what could go wrong next?
It's a special kind of crazy. Essentially, yes. You're constantly running risk analysis in your head, much to the annoyance of my spouse and much to the annoyance of my friends. I'm that person that goes into a restaurant and has to know exactly where the exits are. I want to face the door. I want to look around and see who's near me. All of that stuff. You can't turn it off. And I'm not alone in that. I think our law enforcement friends, our fire services friends, a lot of public works folks kind of have that same model in their heads. But yes, it's true.
Hey Tom, take us through your toughest day on the job. Give us a TikTok of your toughest day, if you could, whatever you can share.
Yeah, there's a few different ones that pop to mind, but I actually hung out with some emergency management pals last night, and we were talking about the blizzard here in Chicago in 2011. And folks would most remember that. There were some iconic images along Lakeshore Drive, which is a pretty major thoroughfare that runs north-south, right along Lake Michigan, right through downtown Chicago, where the land meets the water, essentially. And we had noticed that this blizzard was coming in. We knew a couple days in advance. It did exactly what the forecasters, the meteorologists, told us it was going to do. But it backed in off the lake, so it picked up a ton of moisture, and we had 70-mile-per-hour winds. It is the Windy City. We're used to some pretty good winds, but this was coming off the lake, so uninterrupted, straight line winds, near hurricane force coming off the lake with just a ton of snow. And so what happened was the city closed down Lakeshore Drive. We knew it was going to get bad. We missed it by about half an hour. And you guys who have been in charge of major metropolitan areas, you know how difficult those decisions are. We're trying to get commuters out of downtown. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We're begging and pleading with employers to send their folks home. And we got almost everybody out of downtown. We closed that thoroughfare down, and it was literally just the tail end of the traffic that was out on that drive when the weather really went bad on us. And so that turned very quickly into a major life-threatening situation. Literally, we had a small fender bender and a large articulated bus got stuck. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen a blizzard, but literally, if you sit still for 10 minutes, that vehicle is covered. The snow was coming down that fast and that hard. The snow was up over the tires, up over the bumpers of those personal vehicles, and they were stuck. They weren't moving. And we had north of 750 vehicles stuck on Lakeshore Drive with civilians inside them, and essentially no way to get to them. So that was probably my worst day. That it was a 30-hour day. I can tell you that. I worked 30 hours straight. Slept under my desk for a couple hours there in the middle. But we went out onto Lakeshore Drive. Emergency managers here in Chicago are responders. The expectation is that we go out shoulder to shoulder with the cops and firefighters that do this stuff every day. So on a really bad day, we're I like to refer to us as second responders. We're the folks that go out there and back up the first responders. And so in large SUVs and in fire response vehicles, we were driving northbound in the southbound lanes of Lakeshore Drive because the cars on the northbound lanes had all gotten trapped by the snow and the drifts. And we were going car to car and pulling people out in hip deep snow and getting folks onto buses so that they could stay warm and then bring fuel to those buses. They were essentially little tiny shelters, if you will, and we'd throw all the civilians onto those buses, keep them warm and safe, give them a quick medical check. We'd put a paramedic on that bus, and then we'd retrieve them. A handful of folks at a time, whoever we could fit in a fire truck or a squad response vehicle, and then we take them to safety away from the lake and someplace they could get checked out medically. But you can imagine clearing over 750 vehicles, getting everybody out of there. We did not have a single fatality. which I'm very, very proud of. And that was probably my toughest day at the office, just because of the length and the physical challenge of doing that, of pulling people out of vehicles and physically wading through the snow and getting them to relative shelter of a bus. And then again, once we got them there, bringing them one truckload at a time out of harm's way. And that was a hell of a day, I'll tell you.
Wow, that's amazing.
I want to continue Mayor Reed's question. So you got the civilians out, they're on a bus.
Yeah.
What do you do with them?
Yeah.
And all
Exactly.
the 750 cars are still stuck on the road. Take us through the
Yeah.
rest of that piece. I mean, where are they going to go?
Right. So we got all the folks. Thankfully, we had some city facilities that were open and functional. So you can think of, a cultural center. You can think of a library. You can think of a public works facility, a warehouse sort of facility. So we could get those folks at least to that point. And then a lot of them were able to get transportation on their own and move on. A lot of them we assisted in getting all the way home. You just had to do what you had to do. Once that storm died down a little bit, we ended up with about 20, I want to say 21 inches of snow. But the problem was the drifts. And so that's where the real challenges came in. So you can imagine, you guys have done this. You can imagine the public works effort that had to go into clearing not only major thoroughfares like Lakeshore Drive, that the entire city, the entire region was blanketed with, around 2 feet of snow, drifting up to 6 or 7 feet when you came up against a structure. And so getting those major thoroughfares cleared was a top priority. And then, as you guys know, the business of the city goes on, right? You still have medical emergencies. You still have structure fires. You still have water main collapses. All the stuff that goes on that we have to do and we have to maintain for a major jurisdiction is still going on. So the main priority there was make sure the civilians are safe, even if they have to shelter for a couple hours in maybe not the best circumstances, but they're safe and their well-being is taken care of. And then start clearing those primary thoroughfares. So that you can get that emergency response moving around. It took a Herculean effort. It took a couple of days to really get the city back up and running. A lot of people just had to hunker down and shelter in place. We were fortunate in that the majority of folks either did not go into work that day or had gotten out of work early. Employers were smart enough to send folks home at the lunch hour. So it was a small percentage of our usual commuter population that was downtown and really got heavily impacted. But yeah, it was a Herculean task, guys, and you got to do it one block at a time, right? There's no magic wand you can wave. You just got to rely on those truck drivers, those public works men and women who are just the unheralded heroes of getting stuff done. And they got out there and they got after it. And I remember, I think it was maybe a day or two later where I drove the full length of Lakeshore Drive, which is about 7 miles along the lake. And I was, small claim to fame, but I was the first vehicle. They sent me out there and said, okay, is it passable? Can we get traffic from the south end to the north end of Lakeshore Drive? And so I got in my city SUV and I drove from the south end to the north end. And I'm telling you, the snow drifts on either side of the passable lane on Lakeshore Drive were 12 to 15 feet high. So that tells you the amount of snow that they displaced just to get a lane or two passable to get that major thoroughfare open. So those are the folks who worked their backsides off. It wasn't just the cops and the firefighters and the emergency managers. It was folks driving salt trucks. It was folks in the water department who said, hey, I can drive a big plow truck, put me to work, and running 12-hour shifts, just busting their backsides. That's what got us back up and running.
Just say this is why we do this podcast, because for all of these people who complain about government, what we just heard was why government matters,
Yep.
right? And mayors, you guys are talking about it all the time. Tom used the phrase "get stuff done." You guys usually say "get shit done," but that's what local government is, right?
Yep. That's it. And so much of it is unglamorous, right? But if you fail at that, boy, you hear about it, right? And we got lumps, we got tons of lumps for, oh my God, you stranded all these people on Lakeshore
I
Drive.
wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. We got beat up in the media quite a bit. But I'll tell you what, the fact that we didn't have any fatalities and the fact that we were able to go back and say, look, we had closed the drive. This was literally the tail end of the traffic. Had we closed the drive half an hour earlier, we wouldn't have had any issue at all. It would have been only public works folks out there, frankly. So we were able to, I think, make a pretty good case that we had been putting out a ton of messaging. We've been working with major employers saying, "Hey, send your folks home midday," and we got the majority of the folks out of harm's way and safely at home, or with friends and relatives where they could be out of harm's way. So that case we were able to make. That said, we definitely did a major after-action review. You guys can imagine a major incident like this, and national and international media were showing all those cars entombed on Lakeshore Drive, right? You can imagine we had to tow more than 700 cars to a couple of major lots that we had cleared and track every one of them, right? So we had to say, "Ma'am, sir, we know we stuck you in a bus and got you to a shelter. Here's where your car is at. You can go pick it up now." And effectively clean off all the cars too, right? We had to make sure they were drivable. And so that was a Herculean effort. But part of that after action review was Lakeshore Drive is essentially a divided highway. And you have a giant concrete Jersey barrier that runs down the center of that. It's effectively an 8-lane highway that runs along the lakefront. Very similar to what you see on some East Coast cities, right there up against the Atlantic or against the East River or the Hudson River in New York. Major divided highway, right? We couldn't get the cars turned around because there were no brakes in that Jersey barrier. It's an undivided concrete wall that runs down the length of that drive. Well, not anymore. Now we got breakthroughs. Now we've got areas where public works folks with the right equipment can open up a 2 or 3 car length turnaround in that giant concrete wall and make the hop back and forth from northbound to southbound lanes. And guess what, guys? We use that for strategic emergencies too, right? If we get a big fender bender there that's blocking a lane, hey, now we can have a tow truck grab that car, whip it around through one of those turnarounds, and we've cleared that major thoroughfare a lot quicker than we might have, 15 years ago prior to this incident. So interaction matters. Being able to convey to the public what you've done and what you're doing for them in real time and what you're going to do for them in the near future. I think that's the real key. And we took some lumps in the short term, but I think overall, the fact that we were able to keep those fatalities down, and this was such a huge storm, even for Chicago. We have nasty winters here, guys. Even for Chicago, this was out of the norm. And something that we don't see on a regular basis. So being able to convey that effectively to the public was huge.
Tom, if you were talking to a new mayor who had just been elected, they're in their first 100 days, give us a sense of what you would say when you went in the mayor's office to explain to them why this should be a priority. Because when new leaders take over, there's so much going on during the course of the transition. But I'd like for you to take us into the room and show us what your conversation would look like to make sure that you had the resources, the support, and the access to the leaders.
Yeah, 100%. I think, first of all, it's very important that you show an elected official what you can bring to the table, right? Because to your point, Mayor, they've got so many voices coming at them. You've got to make sure they understand that emergency management is a resource and is a useful tool for them. And that we can do a lot of things in terms of preparation and mitigation in advance with the support of elected leadership. And it's really got to be that partnership. They need to know that they've got a resource, that they've got a subject matter expert, essentially that works for them, right? That's really important. You're not, I'm sitting in the private sector as we have this conversation now. I'm proud of the relationships I have with the public sector, but as a mayor, you've got to have those folks that are direct reports that come directly to you, answer to you, and look out for your best interests and therefore for the best interests of the city, right? In Chicago, it's a little easier to make that argument because there are two former mayors here in Chicago that arguably lost their roles because they botched snow crisis response. That did not occur. The blizzard I mentioned in 2011, Mayor Daley had already announced he was not running for re-election. So at that point, it wasn't his problem, frankly. But there were 2 prior mayors who lost their jobs. They were voted out of office because they botched or were perceived to have botched a major response to a weather event. So that argument is easier to make, sort of that carrot and stick. Hey, Mr. Mayor, hey, Ms. Mayor, I am your resource. I can get in here and do preparedness and mitigation in advance of these sorts of crises. I work for you, sir or ma'am. And let's get in front of this, because if we don't, here's the stick, right? If we screw this up, the voters are going to hold us to account. They're going to beat us up. So I think coming into the mayor's office and being able to say both of those things, right? I'm a resource. I can help you. And if we mess this up, it's gonna hurt both of us. We're going to be answered to a public that's not happy.
Mayors, I assume you both had people in Tom's position, emergency preparation, and how often did they have access to you and Mayor Reed? I forget the exact buckets, but you had on your phone. You've talked about before the buckets that you put employees in. One was the get shit doners. One
Yeah.
was the dream
Dream
deniers or something like that.
dream killers.
Dream killers. So, and I forget the third bucket, but which one is the emergency prep guy in, and how often? And are you
Get shit donors and direct access. Because not to be too cold, but I mean that stuff can get you beat.
Yeah.
So, I mean, anything that causes you to lose the public will um, is a person that becomes a priority.
Same with you, Mayor Nutter?
Definitely. Samantha Phillips was our longstanding OEM, Office of Emergency Management manager, and my role was when we went into the OEM, the Operations Center. Sam was in charge.
Hmm.
I did what she told me to do. Right? You have to have a clear chain of command, and everyone has to understand that this is the person. I ran, I became mayor, I got all that, but I don't know this. And people like Tom and Sam and a number of others who know their work, we have to leave a little bit of that ego at the door and remember that these folks are professionals at what they do.
That's
Amen.
great advice for an incoming chief executive officer of a city. Put your ego aside.
Yeah. And I'll say one thing that's very interesting. Emergency management is not like police or fire, right? Police or fire have been around longer. They're established professions. They tend to have academies, right? So there's a hierarchy. It's sort of established how you get into those fields, and how you work your way up, right? You do the work of police, you do the work of fire, which is largely recognized, I think, by the public. Emergency management is still kind of a new or emerging field. And so every city does it a little differently, right? Some cities, that person reports directly to the mayor. Some cities, that emergency management, that OEM, might be a subsector of police or might be a subsector of fire. New York has toggled it back and forth half a dozen times. It makes my head spin. It's an independent agency, and then it reports through fire or reports through police. Every city's a little bit different. There's no perfect model for that, but I think it's really important, particularly for the folks who may be listening to this, who are current or future leaders. Let's hope. That looks different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and there's no perfect model out there. So I think a mayor or any jurisdictional leader is going to have a lot of say in terms of where that emergency management role fits into their hierarchical structure. And so I think that's important to note too.
Michael, what was your model?
Um, OEM reported to the deputy mayor for public safety. Larry knows him, a guy named Everett Gilson. But in my second term, Everett became chief of staff as well. And so, there was never a time. Sam never had to worry about trying to get in touch with me.
Yeah.
The thing about OEM, Office of Emergency Management, when we're all tucked away in bed, sleeping at night, somebody in that office is awake, um, figuring out whether there's a gas leak somewhere or some other problem or somebody tried to pollute our water or whatever the case may be. And so I agree wholeheartedly with Tom. It's the kind of office I guess, Tom, I mean, obviously that event, I guess everybody knew your name, but if everybody knows the emergency manager, there's something going on, right? Uh, you know, every day they're not in the newspaper is a really great day.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Our emergency manager reported up through our COO, but even though they reported to the chief operating officer, they still had direct line to me as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to have that access. Um,
Absolutely. No, that's very interesting, Mayor Reed and Mayor Nutter.
yeah.
Just
Larry, I'm sorry, you recall the Amtrak 188 train derailment. It was Sam Phillips who called me.
Yeah, what I remember about that is you were at the scene almost
Yes,
like as it happened. I don't know
yes,
how
yeah.
how that happened, but you were there in 5 minutes.
The lights and sirens do help. But yeah, I was there. People were coming off the train. People were walking off the train. Congressman Patrick Murphy, was on that train,
Wow.
uh, and I saw him out there as he was coming back. But the whole team got together. It's a full on effort, and a critical service that most people don't know about. Like Tom said, until things go sideways. And so, it's the training. I wanted to ask you, Tom, I'm always interested in folks' stories. Everybody's got a story. How did you end up in this line of work?
It's a long and circuitous route, sir, but here's the short version. So I did private sector security for years, and then I was a CERT volunteer, the Community Emergency Response Team. And so you may be familiar with those, or folks who are policy wonks or public administration wonks will know them as the Green Helmets, right? So they're a volunteer group, and they go out and assist first responders during major incidents and training and things of that nature. So that got me more into emergency management. And then I started on with the City of Chicago's Emergency Management Agency, OEM, here in Chicago. It's the Office of Emergency Management and Communications, but absolute analog to what you gentlemen ran in your cities. Yep. And so it's, a jurisdictional local emergency management agency that's there to support elected officials and the first responders. I think that's really, really critical. So I really, really enjoyed what I did there. I spent a lot of time doing outreach to the private sector, and I did a lot of liaison. That was a lot of my role there because OEM here in Chicago, as in most cities, it's a small group, right? It's a handful of folks. It's not, you've got thousands of firefighters, you've got thousands of cops. You may have a lot of call takers or dispatchers within that emergency management function. You may have traffic management aides, things of that nature. Many cities house all that in the OEM. Your actual planning and response folks, you're probably looking at a half dozen or a dozen, even for a pretty significant jurisdiction. So
Hmm.
it's a really small group. It's a really small cadre. But boy, I always like to say, you better be like a good crop duster pilot. You better be able to be at a high level and then get right down to the treetops and get super detailed and then go back up to that high level. So you got to be strategic and you got to be tactical. That's what I really enjoyed about the job, guys. I think being able to come from a private sector background, and since then I've worked in the nonprofit sector. I ran security for the Art Institute of Chicago, the big art museum here in Chicago, in the nonprofit sector, and then I've gone back to the private sector. But that's the thing that you see across all of those when you're running emergency management or you're running emergency response is that you've got to be both a generalist and a subject matter expert because you got to bring value to the organization. And so that's kind of my story and how I got to where I got and why I still do it, why I'm that special kind of crazy who likes to keep doing the emergency management and thinking about all the bad stuff and all the hazards like we talked about at the top of the conversation here.
Well, and Tom, I wonder how much of uh, emergency preparedness is about not necessarily fighting the last war, but having the imagination to figure out what tragic thing could happen next. Is that part of the job?
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. I think risk assessment is so underappreciated. Just
JP, are you getting a feedback there, or is that just me?
No, no, it's getting a little bit of echo,
Oh,
but
maybe on my end. There we go. All right.
no, we're okay.
Okay.
I'll just say it again. Risk assessment is so underappreciated. And by that I mean doing true analysis of what's going to bite you, right? It really is that simple. What is going to ruin our day? What is going to threaten our citizens or threaten our infrastructure? And being honest about it. We've got hazards out there that are obvious. We've got hazards out there that aren't so obvious. And so I think it's really important to be holistic. I used the term all hazards earlier. That is definitely a term that Department of Homeland Security and FEMA like to use. But it is that 360. It's that holistic viewpoint where you've got to really truly assess what's going to harm your jurisdiction or what's going to harm your citizens, and then be honest about it. Don't throw it under the rug. And if it's a tough fight, don't avoid the fight. Sometimes there's stuff that it's hard, but we got to do it because we're leaders, and that's our function, that's our job. Just to get wonky with it for a second, there's a concept called the gray rhino concept, and this is by an author named Michelle Wooker. She's an academic. She's a fellow Chicagoan, so she's a really interesting person. But she came up with this concept. It's adjacent to black swan, right? That's a term you hear thrown around a lot, like, oh, nobody saw it coming. It was this black swan event, right? Gray rhino is something everybody sees coming. It's literally a gray rhino standing in your path. It's huge. It's enormous. You can't miss it. But it's the problem or the challenge that somebody decides not to address, right? So the perfect example of that in our society today is climate change, right? We all know that it is a gray rhino. It's immense. And if we don't do something, it's going to gore us, right? It's going to flatten us. And some people just pretend it doesn't exist. Some people say, well, that's too big a challenge to tackle. So that's a great example of a gray rhino. So I really appreciate that concept too. You've got to be honest in your risk assessments. Look for those black swans, look for those wild outliers, but also look for the stuff that's big and obvious and standing right in front of you that's going to ruin your day, right?
I find myself wondering, all three of you, what your reactions have been to watching what's been going on in LA. Media coverage, of course, has focused on second guessing. Our friend Mayor Bass, who we was with us, and we loved her, has gotten all sorts of shit for not being there when the fires started. Which I think is not relevant to lessons we need to learn going forward. But I wonder, all three of you, if watching this, you've been thinking about feeling for and also putting yourself in the shoes of these leaders, and if you have any thoughts, all of you along those lines.
Yeah, I defer to the mayors on this one.
Tim, you want to go?
Yeah, I think it just shows why being mayor of a major city is one of the three toughest jobs in government, because Mayor Bass was having an incredibly successful run, accomplishing so much, and 90-mile-per-hour winds, a series of events take place. And I think that during every mayoralty, there is the thing that is unforeseen that happens to the mayor. And so I think that what she's doing right now is putting one foot in front of the other and surviving criticism that, in my judgment, is enormously unfair. But I think that this kind of situation comes with being mayor. It's very unfair. There are very good explanations for things, but when you give people the power that they invest in the office of mayor, then when they have an opportunity to complain and they think it's a righteous complaint, they're going to exercise that, and it can be brutal.
Right.
And by the way, I remember Mayor Reed, not to bring up any bad, but you got shit for a snowstorm that wasn't really.
Most of the roads were not in
city.
the city of Atlanta. Most of the roads were state roads that we were not responsible for, and the city started functioning pretty quickly. But the fact of the matter is the governor and I had a very strong relationship. And, you know, if you're mayor of a city and you want to blame something on the governor, you better enjoy that day. Because let me tell you, if you got 4 terms, if you got 2 terms or 8 years, he's going to have his opportunity on a whole bunch of other days.
Yeah.
So once again, I say it comes with the job.
Yeah.
And so when I went through that brutal process, we did not turn on each other. I pointed out facts because there was a great deal of ignorance. We got the city running relatively quickly, but we're the home of CNN, and CNN was impacted. So if you have, Comcast is in your city, you damn well better make sure the Comcast roads are running. But regarding Mayor Bass and the fires in California, first, I ache for so many of my friends who are there. But I think that she's going to show that she is the right leader despite the attacks. I mean, she was being attacked by Elon Musk. She was being attacked by her former opponent. She was being attacked by the president-elect of the United States. But what our listeners and our community should know is in every mayoralty, there will be a series of events that no one would have predicted that put you on your heels.
Right.
And you have to have folks around you like Tom and others to work through that and regain the public's confidence. I mean, I went through this snow event and got reelected with 68% of the vote or some number. So I was able to get through that event and then shift Atlanta to a snow footing,
right,
which benefits the city today. Atlanta didn't have any of the equipment that a Chicago, we didn't have it.
Sure. Yeah.
And fortunately, after that event, I was able to everybody agreed that we need to make the massive capital investment that northern cities have on the ready, and that candidly in Atlanta, we always stop the snow. And so the reality shifted on us. And I think that the lesson is that that's the lesson for mayors.
Right.
So the reality in California, I think, has just shifted forever around fire. Fire used to be a manageable series of events that were expected. I know people who stood in their backyards with water hoses, and that's just not the case anymore. And so that I think one of the things when folks were calling me, I said, moments like this come with the job. And this, the complaint about her being in Ghana, I think Mayor Nutter has addressed 25 times on this show. I mean, it's called a telephone. And the same decisions and conversations that she would be making, she would be making in the room, she starts making from where she is. And I mean, I think if you go back and look at how to run a city, Mayor Nutter has made the comment about that. You when you are the executive of a city, you travel with command capability. So
and,
that's what I feel about her.
As if Mayor Bass if she were on the ground, as if she would have stopped the fires.
Right.
I mean, come on now, come on. That's just not. It's just not realistic. But as you said, Mayor Reed, when people feel either emboldened or empowered, or they just want to blame and point fingers. I mean, I didn't. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't see the Great Recession coming. Wasn't my fault, right? But it came. I mean, it was a worldwide thing. You saw the aftermath of COVID, where a number of our friends either decided not to run for reelection. They were so worn out by that, or just lost. And again, people were mad about, masks or restrictions or schools or whatever the case may be. I mean, we were making real people, not me, I wasn't in office, people were making real-time decisions and we didn't even know what we were fighting,
I mean,
right?
I look at London Breed in San Francisco, who I think did as good a job on COVID as any leader in America, and she got beat.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I
So
mean, I'm sanitizing every package that comes in the house, the mail, wiping down my apples. I mean, right? And then 6 months later, oh no, you don't need to do that anymore. And then we're doing something else, and no, you don't need to do that anymore. Right? But we did all these things because we wanted you to live. Yes, we sent your kids home from school because we didn't want them to die. But now you're upset that your kids are home. By the way, they are your kids. I mean, what do you want? What do you want? So I agree with you. And Larry certainly knows this. I mean, at least going back to whether it's Bill Green or Mayor Bill Green, Mayor Good, and beyond. 4 years, 8-year terms. Every one of us has faced some major challenge or challenges, and they often were unforeseen. I'm going to need to think about what was that, the gray rhino? I have to think about that one. See if there were any of those. I had some self-inflicted, I know that. But, it happens. It goes with the territory. You stand up, you show up, and you just keep trying to make the best judgments that you can. This is not perfect.
I think the test of America, of who we are as a country, is going to be how we treat California and how we
Mm,
treat Los Angeles. It's going to be the test of the country. I mean, we are used to responding to Florida
right.
for emergency management.
Right.
And I think that how we treat California is really going to be the test of America, how we treat Los Angeles.
Well, there's already discussions about putting some restrictions on and all of this, and you know,
Things that they should not be contemplating right now with what folks are going through.
no, no. I mean, it speaks to an not even almost. I'm going to just say it. It's un-American.
Yeah.
No question.
That's the term I
It's
would use. Yeah.
un-American.
Hey,
And
Tom,
we're
when you
supposed to be
were Tom, when you were watching what's going on in California with the fires, are you like an NFL player who's on the injured reserve list and is on the sidelines and just killing himself because he can't get in the game? And do you have that feeling? And also, have you seen things that you're thinking, oh, why not do X? Why not do Y?
Yeah, I think to the earlier points by both mayors, I think it's really easy to Monday morning quarterback these kind of incidents, and presuming that things are going to be the same as they have been in the past is one of the cardinal sins of emergency management, right? So in the past, those fires had generally stopped at that urban divide, right? And we've been able to fight them in rural or at least ex-urban areas. But this was a different animal. And we knew we had some very dangerous conditions ahead of time, but we'd always managed to overcome that. The collective we, right? The collective we as a society. And so I think watching it from the sidelines is difficult. It's tough. I've got good friends, good associates of mine who I know are out there, in the command structure, some of them in the field, in danger themselves, doing the work that needs to be done. And so I'm very cautious to second guess folks when, again, this was a hazard that we knew about, but it was a degree and the extent to which that hazard sort of emboldened itself in this particular case that we just hadn't seen before. And so I think it's very hard to second guess folks. But yeah, you always feel like, oh, I wish, had I been there, would I have made that decision? What about this? What about that? But I do know there's some really smart people there on the ground. I heard one quote that I think sort of summed it up for me. and really, I'm not a wildland fire expert. By no means do I want to imply that at all. But I heard a quote that helped me as a bit of an outsider understand, and that was a fire chief who said, "We could have had an engine in every driveway, and it would not have mattered."
Wow.
Now that's something to contemplate, right? The amount of resources that they could have had in place, and with the conditions once the fire ignited, in the wind conditions and with the humidity conditions in the ground and in the material that is fueling this fire, literally no amount of resources in any positioning configuration that we've ever had would have stopped this cold, would have stopped it entirely. And obviously we could have, mitigated this or mitigated that, but I think we just need to understand that it's different. And as the mayor said earlier, you can't just say, well, that's a one-off and that's never going to happen again, right? We need to understand this is a new hazard and a new level of threat that we're going to have to deal with and prepare for.
Yeah, I visited Los Angeles, and I mean, it really feels Katrina-like in terms of the level of destruction to see that happen to an American city, minus, of course, the number of deaths that occurred in Katrina, but the damage is beyond breathtaking.
Wow.
Well, I like your statement, Mayor Reed, that this will be a test of American character. I think that's something we'll have to monitor and talk about as we move forward. And Tom, I really want to thank you because it occurs to me as we were talking to you that we thank our first responders for their service, but most people are not aware of your service, and it's certainly uh, worthy of our thanks as well. So thank you for your service and thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, there's a lot of folks who get out there and get it done. And I greatly appreciate the time with the mayors this morning and with UJP for coordinating this. So thank you, folks. Please don't let the discussion end here. This is such important stuff.
Yeah.
We need to get future leaders prepped and ready. It's so important to all of us.
Great. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Accelerator for America is excited to partner with the Philadelphia Citizen and former mayors Michael Nutter and Kasim Reed on how to really run a city. One of today's greatest challenges for cities across America is housing. Since 2019, home prices in the United States have jumped by an average of 47%. And now nearly 50% of American households who are renters are cost burdened, meaning that they spend more than 30% of their gross income on housing costs. In response to this crisis, Accelerator for America and our research partners at the Drexel University NOAC Finance Lab have launched the National Housing Crisis Task Force. And last year, in November, this bipartisan task force, led by the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, and mayors of Atlanta and Cleveland, Andre Dickens and Justin Bibb, along with our private sector leader, Susan Thomas from the Fifth Third Bank Community Development Corporation, we released a federal housing policy agenda that includes 40 detailed recommendations aimed at reducing regulatory barriers and increasing housing production nationwide. It's time we started treating this housing crisis like the crisis that it is. Cities and their related public entities own a lot of land that could be used for housing development. And frankly, cities don't always know what they own. Through a partnership with the GovTech firm Ptolemy, AFA is helping 17 cities identify more than 100,000 parcels of public land across 464 different public entities. These cities can now systematically evaluate these sites to determine if they are ripe for housing development. Cities can help the private sector develop more housing by amending land use policies and expediting permitting. Many cities are amending their zoning codes to allow for more multifamily construction. Permitting offices are establishing fast-track processes for new housing construction. In Atlanta, Mayor Dickens has established and empowered a housing strike force to coordinate and speed housing production across multiple city agencies that all have something to do with housing. The city has also partnered with philanthropic leaders in Atlanta to raise $350 million to support affordable housing production. In Chattanooga, the city is using a pilots program to provide targeted support for individual affordable housing units, which provides the amount of subsidy needed to ensure those units are built and are affordable at specific income levels. Cleveland and Boston are experimenting with incentives and coordinated purchasing programs to encourage modular manufacturers to locate locally, potentially decreasing the cost of new units and creating high-paying manufacturing jobs for local residents. Cities as big as Los Angeles and as small as Ingham County, Michigan, home to Lansing, passed dedicated ballot measures recently to support homeless services and affordable housing production. These are just a few examples. Accelerator for America and our partners will be releasing a housing policy action plan for state and local leaders with more specific policy solutions and implementation guidance this year. While we don't know what will happen at the federal level, there are many substantive actions that cities can take to create national change from the ground up and provide more housing for all.
Guys, what I like about what Accelerator for America is up to is I think we're going to be seeing disinvestment from the federal government under Donald Trump in cities. And the idea that of pulling together ideas that might work in reaction to that is I think critical. What thoughts do you have? When you both governed, there was no housing crisis. This is a new thing. I mean, there were issues, but this is now and Mayor Nutter, I believe, I remember you eliminated under your tenure veteran homelessness, if I'm correct.
I did
But
too.
both of you. So that, I mean,
In partnership with
that shows what local action can do. But tell me let's hear your reactions to the Accelerator for America action plan.
Moving city-owned real estate in a fair partnership that shares the upside of success with the private sector to build houses is the future. I mean, the amount of land that the city of Atlanta owns in fee simple, if you pair that with the ability of the city to expedite progress through its own entities, its own approval processes, and all the rest, it is the opportunity to move the needle without regard to what is going on in Washington, D.C. That, and there's a business, a young man named Booker T. Washington that we actually hosted last year who is doing just that with local governments. So he already has another new development in a dynamic city called Union City, where they streamlined the process. I think more than 2/3 of the houses are already sold in the new development. And I think he'll have it built out in 18 months. And families moved in 18 to 24 months. So it's got to happen, and it's happening. And Accelerator for America really creating a toolbox, if you will, so that leaders aren't starting from scratch.
Right.
Is exactly what we need to be promoting, because every elected official is on a time clock.
Right. There's no need to reinvent the wheel here, and as was pointed out in the audio clip, tons of best practices all across the country. There's a menu, as Mayor Reed laid out. Every one of those may not necessarily work for every city, but there are enough ideas within their playbook that would allow a city to move things forward. The second is, I mean, I firmly believe that there's no city in America that can solve their housing challenge, problem, or crisis by themselves. You'll really have to get the private sector much more actively engaged and incentivized to partner either with the city directly or with a local housing authority and the like to drive that market. I would say, Larry, I mean, I appreciate the recognition with regard to veteran homelessness, and both Mayor Reed and I had success there, but it I can't speak for Atlanta, obviously, but it did not mean a complete elimination of homelessness. all across the city. The primary focus was on our veteran population, and we had tens of thousands of people still on waiting lists at the Philadelphia Housing Authority, and other folks who are looking for housing. And so it has now reached crisis proportions. It was a challenge and a problem, certainly during my time, but I think we crossed that Rubicon a while ago.
Great points by both of you, and we'll certainly. And I love that you brought up Booker T. Washington, because we had him at our Ideas We Steal festival. Just a dynamic young guy who's doing this development as a partnership with local government, and I think that is a fascinating model to and Bruce Katz has talked about this, that figuring out, most local governments don't even know all the assets that they own, and if you could sell the land for $1 to a developer, that makes the numbers work, and now you've incentivized a market solution. So really fascinating, and fascinating work, and thankful for Accelerator for America. Thankful for you guys. This was another good one.
Yeah, Tom he was all over his stuff. I was just trying. I mean, that situation in Chicago sounded horrific. 750 vehicles stuck on the road, 3 feet of snow, and I mean, that's just a nightmare. And the fact that they didn't lose a soul is a testament to their capacity and capability out there.
Well, I tell you, when I pointed out that we didn't lose a soul, they turned it into a meme and said that I said, "Did you die?"
Oh my God! What?
Anybody that complained? First of all, I never said that, but
Did
they
you
turned
die?
it into a meme that said, anybody that complained, I would just ask them, "Did they die?" Because we work to keep folks safe. So the point I'm making is that if you're a mayor of a major American city, you're going to end up dealing with something that totally unforeseeable, and that
Right.
it is the job, it is the work.
That's a great point. And by the way, at some point, I want to have a discussion about how you handle media when you're in the position you guys are in, because a lot of times I've learned from both of you in the last year and a half that we've been doing this, that you're often in a can't win position. And I think that's what we've seen with Karen Bass of late. It's just a simplistic story because there's a photo of her in Ghana, so there's the story.
Yeah.
But
Well,
what's that really
Sky
about?
News was chasing her around while she was waiting for her plane. So she's waiting for a plane, and they've got a reporter from Sky News following her around, asking her these questions while she's trying to come home.
Wow.
So it just shows, shows the kind of unfairness that comes with it. And then the later examples about how challenging the fire was didn't come until after the excruciating criticism that came, real time.
Right.
So that's the world we're in.
Yeah. Yeah. It seemed you told us a story, I think from your first day, and I don't know whether you communicated it through the media or through other channels. This was about your bag.
Oh, you mean when someone stole my bag?
I love that story.
I was mayor then.
Yes.
But they called me to tell me I was mayor when that happened. I had gone to Lenox Mall,
right,
and to pick up a gift.
Right.
And I drove, a car, and while I was there, they stole my bag.
Right.
And so they called my father, and they told my dad that we had made the mistake of stealing the mayor's bag. We want to give it back to him. It's going to be behind the trash can at the Phillips gas station on Ponce. And everything is there. Totally true story.
Had you told anybody that the bag was missing, or they just...
Oh, you bet I had. I had. But the problem was that the cameras at that time in Lenox were so cloudy that they couldn't pull the information they needed. And the guy called my father, my dad, because my dad was who I was talking to before I went into Lenox. So my phone was in there. And when I tell you everything was in my bag, everything was in my bag.
Well,
Yeah,
I remember that coming up before, and you saying that's the moment you knew you were turning the corner on crime.
I did. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because it was going to be, let me tell you something. It's going to be a rough month for the criminals. I'm going to tell you that.
Back that. That's that thing you
Because
said.
you all remember what Willie Brown said.
What the television?
Willie got elected. He called all the criminals and the gangsters together. And he said, I'm a black mayor of San Francisco. There are almost no black people in San Francisco. And I'm here to tell you, if you're going to do something bad, take it to Oakland. He said, because if it's crime in San Francisco, it's going to be some consequences and repercussions. So I'm telling you. He said, Oakland's not far.
That's awesome.
That also has the benefit of being a totally true story.
Consequences. Constantly going to be consequences. He said there are hardly any black people in San Francisco.
Yeah. You know, Willie got elected. San Francisco is 5.5% black.
That's amazing.
And they elect this black guy.
And he did, this is what, in the 80s or yeah,
90s, early 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yes.
How many terms did he serve?
Is that a testament just to his unique political skills?
He's one of the best to ever do it. I mean, he's just one of the best to ever do it. I mean, goodness gracious, the longest serving speaker in the history of California. Even when the Democrats lost control of the chamber, he was still speaker. I mean, this stuff is crazy. You can't make it up. Then he gets elected mayor of San Francisco only because, you know, when they walked up to him and asked him, you know, how he felt about term limits, he said, my success is in high school. What are you talking about? So then they pass a statewide law to get him out of the speakership. They changed the law, put term limits in place. So that's how he ended up running for mayor of San Francisco.
What successor is in high school?
He said his success is in high school. What are you talking about?
That's great. That's great. I renew my plea to you to let's try to get him on here.
Yes. I tell you, I was Ambassador Young was in the hospital, and so I go by to see him after giving this marvelous talk at Jimmy Carter's funeral.
I saw that.
He was definitely the best person there who wasn't a family member.
Yeah.
So I go and I sit with him. We're up late talking, and for whatever reason, he was in the mood to talk about Malcolm X, who he had a wonderful relationship with. Turns out to be 45 of the most fascinating minutes of my life.
Oh man!
And just to show you what a total, talking about serendipity. So I'm just going there to put my eyes on him, right. and he started, for whatever reason, we started talking about what people were like. And he was talking about Malcolm X and how they developed this relationship and how the dynamic between Dr. King and Malcolm X, but through a totally different lens than you would expect. I tell you, man, I mean, it gives me, it inspires me to keep going in these days that we're in.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great place to end here. And I will also renew my fantasy of getting Reverend Young on here but I don't know. I'd be really nervous because I think he is. And I watched that sermon he gave at President Carter's funeral. But I think he's an American hero. I mean, I just think he is one of the true heroes of the 20th century.
Yes.
And not least because he endorsed you for mayor way back when.
endorsed. I mean, he made me mayor. I mean,
Yeah.
Andrew Young and Jamie Foxx. You
What
know,
was Jamie Foxx's?
I might not have my seat and then Mayor Nutter had a lot to do with me becoming mayor because I hired his team after seeing his commercials because I was in Philadelphia when he was running.
Oh, that's right. The campaign group, right? With JJ Balaban and
AJ Balaban, the campaign group.
What?
And he was the underdog. And they said he was going to lose. And then he had this incredible commercial with his daughter. So I'm a blessed man. Jamie Foxx.
What's the Jamie Foxx part?
yeah.
Yeah, so Jamie Foxx did a fundraiser for me when I was broke. And then, and I mean, you know, when you're really out of money, man, like,
Yeah.
I don't mean like kind of out. I mean, really out.
Oh, yeah, out.
He comes in and he does a fundraiser for me. We're friends. But then he records my ad, which wins this political award. So you're listening to my commercial and it's friggin' Jamie Foxx narrating the commercial.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it was crazy. So you can't believe it.
That's heavy.
Yes. He totally narrated my commercial and won the Poly or whatever
the Poly.
Whatever the award is for political commercials.
It's a Poly. Yeah.
And
we won in 2007.
It took off. I mean, I won by 714 votes. So whether it was Mayor Nutter and JJ Balaban, Ambassador Young was my closing commercial, and then the Jamie Foxx piece and the narrating the commercial is one of the reasons that I get to hang out with you guys.
Well, that's
really wild.
That's awesome.
I didn't know about the Jamie Foxx component.
Yeah, that's my man.
So it's in rotation now. People, it comes up from time to time. The movie Law Abiding Citizen.
Yeah.
So I think it's on. It's either on Netflix or Amazon right now.
I'm watching it. I'm gonna watch it this weekend.
Whenever it comes up, people mention it to me. So we had a press conference.
Yeah.
When they were getting ready to start filming, and so filming, it was Jamie Foxx, Gerard Butler, a couple of the others. Jamie Foxx, we let everybody speak. Jamie Foxx decides to launch into an imitation of me.
Yes.
At the press conference.
Yeah, he would totally do that.
At the press conference.
Yeah, he just filmed his Netflix special in Atlanta. It was crazy.
Oh, yeah, it was what had happened was.
Yeah, what had happened was. Yes.
Yeah, well, we got to dig up that Nutter impression. It's got to be on tape somewhere.
Oh, no, it's definitely out there. It's definitely out there.
We got to find it.
We'll play it on our next show.
Jamie Foxx. He's something else, boy. Anyway, all right,
guys. I'll see you all soon.
This is awesome.
All right, man. Be cool.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Bruce. Well, that's it for this episode of How to Really Run a City. As always, if you have questions for the mayors or ideas you'd like to see us explore, drop us a line at podcast@thephiladelphiacitizen.org. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends about us. We really want to widen the conversation because by 2050, something like 2/3 of the world will live in cities. As cities go, so goes the nation, and so goes the world. For now, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.